Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this Tilly. Okay, so this one doesn't say Tilly on the box, it's a British light utility car 10 HP. But Tilly is a bit more catchy, even if it is a very silly name. Round here, we change utility to ute, which is just as silly really, but it is fewer syllables, so that makes sense I guess. Anyway, this is the 48th scale plastic kit from Tamiya, and if you've been around my channel for a while, you'll know that I am quite fond of this range. Yeah, we know! Get to it! Let's have a look at what's in the box. There are 2 sprues. Well, 3 if you count the vehicle's body. I don't, so 2 sprues. One in the usual opaque plastic, and the other one being clear. The opaque sprue has most of the car's frame and detail-y bits and pieces. All of the plastic in this kit is the high quality I would expect from Tamiya. They're very consistent, so this isn't surprising. It is nice though. These might not be extreme, super detailed models, but they are well detailed and very nicely made. Mold lines were, as always, present, but they're barely worth mentioning, such is their insignificance. The Tilly's body, as I mentioned, is its own separate piece. There is a little bit of sprue at the front that you'll have to take care of, but otherwise it's really neat and pretty much ready to drop right onto the frame. Of course, you do have to add some extra bits to it before that. It looks good though, I'm sure you'll agree. And here's the clear sprue. It seems like an odd choice, but this not only includes the window glass as you would expect, but also a couple of lamps, which I guess isn't that odd, and the optional cargo cover for the rear of the Tilly. That's the bit that's kind of odd, considering that none of it should be see-through. Not really a problem at all. It should paint up just like regular plastic, it's just a bit odd. Still, these parts look rather nice, and they're just as well made as the opaque parts. Here we see the decals. There seems to be quite a few choices here. I'm not sure how one of these is meant to be marked up, but I think I want to use whichever option that 69 decal is part of. Not really sure why. Possibly it's because I'm a sensible and mature adult. Tamiya's decals have always been pretty decent to me, so that's what I'm expecting. Not much else to say about them really. The instructions I do have things to say about.
Oh great, he's going to whine about how the instructions kept flopping over.
How do you know?
I saw your stream!
Oh yeah, well, the long strip of instructions with folds partway through some of the diagrams was a bit annoying to deal with, but the instructions are quite good, and the diagrams themselves are, for the most part, easy to understand and follow. I did get a little bit caught by the axles, mostly because they were shown as already installed and I didn't see that right away, where everything else is shown as off the model with arrows indicating where it should go. Anyway, it is now time to englue some bits of plastic together, and hopefully, at the end, we'll have a nice little Tilly. Stay tuned to find out if that is the case. The first step is to attach this little front suspension doodad. There isn't much to it, just make sure that it's around the right way, and that you put the pin in the guide hole, and it pretty much just plops right into place. Then, why not add the exhaust pipe? This is easy to place, and even though it will barely be visible, I think it's still a nice detail, and it adds a lot to the underside of the model. Next, the rear leaf springs go into place. These are individual parts, but they are the same part. Not that there's only one part that you have to somehow share, but they're identical.
Thanks for clearing that up!
So you can put either one on either side, just make sure that they're both facing forward. It's not very difficult. Here's where I was a little bit bamboozled by the axles. I went to install the wheels, but noticed that there was nothing to hold them. Upon looking at the instructions a bit closer, the axles are there, and they're shaded in a light grey colour. The instructions don't tell us to put them in their places specifically, but it's not an especially difficult thing to do. Pretty simple to work out on your own. There isn't anything to lock them into place, but you don't actually have to worry about getting them centered. The wheels should take care of that once they're on, so I add glue when the wheels are in place. The wheels do have a little bit of play to them, but nothing a bit of nudging can't take care of. I suppose if you really wanted to, you could be careful with the glue, and only glue the wheels to the axles, and not the axles to the framey bit, and then your Tilly could be free rolling. I didn't really want to do that, so I didn't, but it is something you could do. Adding the rear wheels is pretty much the same as the front, just the parts are a bit different. Once that's done, I add this bar thing, which is related to the steering and probably has a proper name like Timothy or Reginald or something, but we're just going to call it this bar thing. The front bumper comes next, and this has some nice keying that makes it really easy to get it into just the right spot. The front bumper has a gentle curve to it, while the rear bumper is straight, so it's kind of hard to get those two parts mixed up. I mean, if you wanted to, you could, I believe in you, but you probably don't. Installing the rear one is the same as the front, except it goes onto the rear, not the front. The seats come next, and I'm reminded that on stream, it was determined that seats could be called butt palaces. So installing these butt palaces is pretty simple. The gear shifter comes next, and I may not have cleaned all of the mold lines off of this part, so it doesn't seem to sit perfectly, but the floor portion of it probably won't be very visible anyway, so I don't think it's too big a deal. The interior is kind of minimal anyway, and it's not the main focus of the model, so this is sufficient. The radiator grille goes into place here, and I quite like the way they've designed this, so that it slides in from the inside. Not only is it easy to get into the right position, but it's quite nice and neat looking. The only flaw is that I removed a tiny bit too much material from the front of the bonnet when I was cleaning it up. Some more internal detail now, these seats. A bit less palatial than the forward butt palaces, but they'll still do the job, and are easily positioned thanks to the obvious guides on the floor. I would imagine these seats are optional, and if you didn't want them, it would be pretty simple to remove the guides. Obviously I'm not doing that. I think they'll add something, even if they'll barely be visible through the windows. That assembly can then be pressed into place in the body, and it probably won't stay there of its own volition, so the glue will convince it to stay. How about we assemble the dashboard next?
What if I don't want to?
I don't care. This is quite simple to do. You just glue the tab on the steering column part to the recess on the dashboard part. Then, glue the steering wheel onto one end of the steering column. I'm sure you could glue this onto either end, but you want to put it on the shorter end, the one that'll be sticking up into the cab. It didn't seem to line up perfectly straight, but in the end I just figured, meh, close enough. The mudguards go into place next, and the keying here is pretty good, though it doesn't quite just drop right into place, it almost does, and that's almost as good. Not that this is hard to put on, it just took a little bit of gentle nudging and some pressure. The fuel filler recess, I don't quite know what to call that. This part goes into place nice and easily. The thing is shaped such that it only goes into place one way. Then, the tiny little fuel cap can go on. This actually went on a bit easier than I was expecting. Probably just dumb luck, really. I rotate it around so the little, I assume it's a cap holding strap or something. The little detail-y bit is facing downward. I'm pleased the carpet monster didn't eat this. It's a nice little detail and I think it looks really good. I follow this with some more fiddly bits. Lamps. I guess they're indicator lamps or something, and not headlamps. These are obviously from the clear sprue. You can tell because they're clear. They're kind of fiddly to install owing to their size, but otherwise not too bad. Remember how I glued the steering wheel to the dashboard?
No.
Well, I did. And now it's time to glue that assembly into place. It's not too difficult, though some tweezers could be quite helpful. On the roof of the cab, I glue this shovel, which is quite easily positioned thanks to the guide pins.
Are you going to make some sort of can you dig it joke?
I would never do that. In front of that, you can see there's a space for a spare tyre. The mounting thing for this, with the handle, forms the guide pin, and that makes sense really. This does mean you'll have to put the retaining thing in place before putting the wheel on the roof, which is not really much of a challenge at all. Next, I put this little semaphore thing. It's got to be some sort of signalling device, and it's only on the left side. Obviously I've got no idea what it's for, but it is an interesting little detail, and it's quite easy to put on, you just might need to do a bit of nudging. You're up to a bit of nudging, right? A headlamp with a blackout cover thing over it goes into place on the front left of the Tilly, and I found it a bit tricky to manipulate because of the mudguard and because of not wanting to knock that other smaller lamp out of place, but I got there in the end. The headlamp on the right side was pretty much the same, just it's an uncovered headlamp. Also, it's in clear plastic. You could probably do some cool paint trickery with this by painting the non-clear parts with silver before putting down the base coat to make that lamp look a bit more convincing. Maybe that's something for future Herbert to try. The bridging weight placard goes into place next, and this is simple enough. The mounting bit is shaped such that it should sit neatly on the front of the right mudguard, though there isn't actually anything to guide this. I guess that's so if you don't want to use that part, you can omit it without filling any holes in. Now for some more clear parts, not the window glazings though. The rear cover thing, which I'm putting together, is pretty easy to put together. First, we press together the two halves of the main section, and there are some very small tabs in there to help with positioning. You can see the glue is already causing some discoloration. Fortunately, these parts aren't meant to be clear anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I add the rear flap thing next, and you get a choice here of having the canvas flap rolled up or down. Clearly, I've chosen down, mostly to avoid having to put too much effort into painting the interior.
You lazy shit!
I then glue the tailgate into place, which is obviously from the opaque sprue. This is even easier than it looks. You could probably throw it from across the room and it would just drop into place. And then the model is pretty much completed, but because the interior does need to be painted before final assembly, I'm going to leave it in 3 parts. The body sits on top of the frame assembly nice and easily, and you can't really tell that it's not glued together. Then the rear cover can sit in the appropriate place. It won't quite stay there, but it's good enough for this purpose. Painting is also the reason the clear parts for the windshield and side windows aren't in place, and sure you could mask around them, but it's even easier to leave them off until painting is done. Anyway, that's the Tamiya British Light Utility Car 10HP, or Tilly, completed. I think it's a really nice little model, and while I'm no Tilly surgeon, the detail is quite convincing. I'm sure there are some tiny little details that enthusiasts might notice aren't there, and it isn't an extremely super detailed model, it's not intended to be, but it is still very good. This kit was pretty simple to put together. I doubt anybody is surprised by that. Most of Tamiya's 48th scale kits aren't particularly difficult, and there's not a lot to this one, so it's a bit easier than most. That's not a complaint at all, and it's exactly what I was looking for at the time. A nice, quick, simple model to have a good relaxing stream with, where the model would be done at the end. It took about 90 minutes to do this on stream, and without the distractions of streaming, I would imagine you could probably do it in half the time. I did pretty well with this too. There were no carpet monster attacks, and I didn't have to press the "oh dear, Herbert made a mistake again" button even once.
That's unusual!
It sure is. Anyway, this is a good model, I had fun with it, and I think the result is rather nice. Not much more to say beyond that really, nothing I can say that you can't see with your own eyes anyway. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comment section below. I hear it's pretty good for that. If you want to watch me build kits like this one live on stream, head on over to my Twitch channel, which is where I happen to stream. The link is in the description below. And if you haven't already done so, why not subscribe here on YouTube for the low price of absolutely nothing? Sounds like a good deal to me. Or maybe, if you have the means, and you want to help a Herbert Erpaderp do Herbert Erpaderp things, and see my videos a bit early, consider becoming a patron. You can find links to Patreon, and all of my other things like Discord and social media, in the description below. And, as always, I shall return soon. So until then, be excellent to each other, have a nice day, and thanks for watching. Farewell.